organization primarily owns, manages, operates income qualified multifamily properties up and down the East Coast. My group specializes in energy efficiency weatherization for low income qualifying. I specifically worked with Dominion on implementation of the low-income IAQ solar program for the past year and a half, and so we did about 105 installs into that program for the past year.
Hey everybody, my name is Eric Johnston, and I serve as the CEO for the Virginia Community Action Partnership. So we're the statewide association for 31 community action agencies in Virginia, and in your area, they run Head Start programs, weatherization programs, job training, economic mobility. So our focus is on serving people under 200% federal poverty, which are hoping to get back into the workforce. In previous lives, I've worked with county governments and leadership in the Virginia Association of Counties, and as a leader in the Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm really excited to be a part of this work group, and look forward to working with all of you and the Virginia Energy team.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Van Langen. I'm the co-executive director for LEAP, the Local Energy Alliance Program. We are an energy efficiency-based nonprofit that focuses on home energy audits and retrofits for primarily a residential audience, pretty similar to CHP. We leverage funding from utilities, state, municipalities, and everything else to connect them with homeowners and renters in the state. We also manage a program called Solarize Virginia, which started in 2014. So we celebrated our 10th anniversary last year. It is statewide now. We've helped over 1,500 people install solar through the program, and it's education. We're connecting them with vetted installers, so I have a lot of experience vetting installers and working with them, but also answering a ton of questions from homeowners across the state. We were also involved in Dominion's low-income solar program last year as one of the implementers, and we helped a little over 200 low-income households install solar last year. So looking at the distinction between the market rate and low-income audience there, and kind of better understanding the differences in needs and knowledge.
Hi, I'm Damian Pitt. I'm a professor of urban and regional planning at VCU in the School of Government Public Affairs. I'm also the associate director of VCU's Institute for Sustainable Energy and Environment. I've done a lot of research over the years, primarily on distributed solar, but also some on utility scale solar, the project that Aaron and I just finished. This is my third time on like a sort of statewide solar panel of some sort. About 10 years ago, we had something called, I want to say, the Small Solar Working Group. Is that what we called it, Kevin?
Solar development.
No, before that.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was called the Small Solar Working Group that Sam was on. If I recall, everybody's losing track of which group was which here. I was also on the Development Authority for a little bit, and now I'm happy to be part of this.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeff High from Give Solar. I'm the director of Give Solar, and we are partnering with Habitat for Humanity around the state. There's 38 Habitat offices around the state, and we've been working on a solar project for the last several years, trying to incorporate solar into the building process, because Habitat is a home builder, and it's not that big of a deal to add solar when you're already building the house. So yeah, looking forward to being a part of this group, and I reside in Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashish Kapoor. Coming from Loudoun County, I work for Piedmont Environmental Council, senior energy and climate advisor there. EEC works on mainly land conservation, land use issues. Recently, there's a lot of interaction with the data center industry in the north. I work on a range of kind of large-scale solar legislative kind of land use impacts. But DG is really in our wheelhouse, so legislatively trying to promote DG as much as we can. Work on the Solarize program, and we have an agrivoltaics project that we're developing right now at EEC's farm. We have a community farm with battery backup and crops under panel. It's been consuming more of my time than I would like, but super exciting and kind of a hopefully demonstration project for the region. And yeah, just happy to be here and figure out how to facilitate this process. I also just mentioned a public interest attorney by training, but I worked for Sunrun for a couple of years, so I truly do think that solar does save folks money. It's a good business model, and when attached with batteries, we can battery incentive at the state level. I think that'd be an exciting way to further the savings.
Hi, I'm Alec Ward with the Solar Energy Industry Association, SEIA. I'm our Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs, so we're based in DC, but I live down in Richmond. So very federally focused in my position, so I've been having a fun week, I think as a lot of people here have, when I say that, yeah, very sarcastically. So yeah, a lot of uncertainty in the business right now, but happy to be here and working at a more state, local level. I was in California doing state policy there for the past 5 years. But I grew up here, so it's nice to come back and be a part of this group to help bring some clean, accessible energy to a hometown that I really care about.
Well, I'm Charlie Coggeshall with the Coalition for Community Solar Access, which is the primary trade association representing companies, mostly for-profit, some nonprofit, that are involved in the community solar market space across the country. We have over 100 member companies. I cover the Mid-Atlantic region, so I cover Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey. In Virginia, we probably have around 30 interested, engaged member companies, and excited to be a part of this group. In Virginia, the primary programs are called shared solar. There is community solar also, but that's, we think is a good vehicle for deploying some of this solar for all funding. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I don't live near the rivers. Our house is okay, but the city was hurting, but we're getting there. But yeah, appreciate being here. I'll say, background-wise, I've been doing community solar for probably about 10 years. I've been in the solar policy space for 15, 20 years. Starting out at the federal level, NREL, Department of Energy. I was actually at the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy SACE for several years as well in advocacy. So I've got a pretty broad spectrum of solar policy experience.
Brandon Prelude, Program Director for Solar United Neighbors here in the state in the state of Virginia. I live in the Hampton Roads area, and so focusing with Sun on deployment through bulk purchasing programs similar to Austin, as well as advocacy and bringing volunteers and advocates together, as well as policy initiatives. Pardon the suit today because I spent some time at the General Assembly building. So glad to be here and glad to be a part of this panel.
Folks in the back, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
I will. I'm Rachel Hutchinson. I'm with Project Homes. I'm the Director of Utility Programs in the Energy Conservation Department. The past couple years, we've been part of the emergency solar program.
In this room, and I feel really grateful for that. So with that, I'm going to go over our agenda, which you will notice has changed a little bit, and we will start with that next. But we're going to talk about the status of federal guidance first, which is going to give a little background on what we're seeing right now, and then we'll spend the bulk of our time looking at our work plan, which you might have had time to glance at, and if not, it's on the website. We can pull it up as we talk through it. Some stakeholder engagement, potentially kind of next steps, and then we'll have time at the end for any questions or additional comments. But with that, if you want to.
All right, hey folks, again, I'm Bettina. I'm with Virginia Department of Energy. So I thought there might be some questions, or at least like what is Virginia Energy's understanding as a Solar for All recipient of the new guidance coming down from the federal government. So just wanted to give you an update as to what we know and how we're moving forward, given obviously a lot of uncertainty. And I think we'd be welcome to hear from you all as well, since we're I think we're all learning and adjusting for sure. So I think a couple things are true and important for us as a Solar for All recipient. One, that under the Unleashing American Energy executive order released by the Trump administration on January 30th. It did put all IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, and bipartisan infrastructure law programs on pause while they are being evaluated for alignment with the Trump administration's energy policy as set forth in that Unleashing American Energy executive order. So we are awaiting that review. Agency heads, including the EPA administrator, have 90 days to submit that review, and then there will be some action taken by the Director of Office of Management and Budget. So the second thing that is true for us is that we are under contract with EPA for this award. And so, as such, we have a work plan that we submitted. We have reporting that is ongoing. We actually are submitting our first semi-annual report at the end of today. So we have terms and conditions that we need to comply with. And so we are continuing to implement our work plan and stay compliant with our award. At the same time, of course, we are monitoring new guidance as it becomes available, and we will, we recognize, going into the conversation today, that all elements of our plan are subject to change based on any new terms and conditions we get, based on any new guidance we get. One thing in particular affecting today, the executive order on energy did include a provision rescinding the executive order that established the Justice 40 initiative, and you've heard that there is some rescission of DEI initiative executive orders as well. And so that is something that we're navigating. There's some concern that potentially the establishment of an advisory group, an official advisory group, would be either discouraged or even prohibited. And so out of kind of this cautious way forward of implementing our program work plan, we decided to have a public input session. We wanted to give a status update, get input, and so either by way of public input sessions moving forward or establishment of an official advisory group, we're really excited to get your input. So that's just kind of how we're navigating these things that are true for us that sometimes can feel in tension right now when there's so much uncertainty. Kelly?
Oh, I was just going to say, as you can imagine, the first OMB guidance that came out earlier this week, I think, was some worry, and so this decision about not holding an advisory group meeting is very, very recent. So I apologize to those of you that traveled really far and we're no longer actually forming the group formally, but this was very awesome.
I hesitate to ask if there are any questions, but are there any questions or comments, of course?
So this group is not formal until we get more guidance.
We were hoping originally to choose a chair, vice chair, bylaws today, but we've been told that we should not do that in 2 December.
This is all under the executive order, this pause in all the direction you've been getting. That's everything we're pointing back to. This one executive order that pauses disbursements of funds.
Yeah. And then, so there's, as you of all people know, there's an executive order, and then there's plenty of implementation of that through different memos from entities like OMB. So we have started to see some of those come out, specifically related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the Justice 40 initiative.
I hesitate to ask.
Yes.
So, in the department's deciding not to actually form this advisory group today, this is not a formal meeting of that group.
Correct.
We all just came here because we smelt the coffee and followed our noses into this room together.
Well, this has always been posted as a public meeting, right? Any public body is a public meeting, so yes.
And is it the Unleashing American Energy EO or the EO? Which EO specifically is discouraging or prohibiting the advisory groups?
It's unclear, so we've been told to cease any activities related to community benefits plans or Justice 40 initiative, and it's unclear whether future guidance explaining what that means will have any kind of opinion on having or prohibiting advisory groups. Yeah, we don't know.
What a wonderful random meeting of assorted people here.
Planned public meeting.
Yeah, well, with that, again, thank you everyone for being here, and apologize that this was such a last change, but we still hope to have a great time for listening and feedback today, and hope that we use all of these comments and such moving forward. So whether or not it's an official, we're glad you're here. Our work plan has been posted publicly. You all should have received it in an email. Understand if you were not able to read in detail all 40 pages of it, but it's exciting that it's out there. So we can talk about it openly today. And as you saw, we have a lot of different sub-programs. We have benefits EPA is requiring. Again, these are potentially subject to change. But I just wanted to flash this up here and kind of mention the different sub-programs in case anyone has not been able to look through things. And then talk through a few more things, and then towards the end we have some leading discussion questions to kick off. What were your reactions to maybe what you've seen, or what other people are mentioning that maybe they saw if you haven't had a chance to read. So again, we have kind of 4 main sub-programs within our Solar for All work plan. Jesse mentioned he is leading our single-family direct ownership, single-family third-party ownership, and then multifamily solar plus storage portions of our grant. And then we have shared solar, which Angelica will be overseeing, and also the Grid Infrastructure and Interconnection Fund. I think that those first 3 bullets are pretty self-explanatory, probably to the folks in this room. For the Grid Infrastructure and Interconnection Fund, as you may have heard or may already know, there's often large costs associated with connecting big solar projects into the grid. And so this is hopefully to potentially help with some of those costs that make projects unable to be installed. We also have a workforce development portion of our grant, and then marketing, education, and outreach as well. And I won't talk through the EPA potential because we do need to have 20% bill savings. I expect that will stay the same, and other meaningful benefits for the folks that we're serving. So again, just another graphic. These are different pots of money. As a team internally, and I think this is a question that I'll bring up in a little bit, we've been trying to think of a way to orient ourselves. As you can imagine, there's a lot of different things that we're exploring, different opportunities, and all different. And every state has done different things that we could draw from, and so we wanted something to come back to and say, this is kind of our North Star. These are the goals that we're looking towards. And so we created kind of like a vision statement, and I'll just read it to you. Virginia Solar for All aims to transform the solar market in Virginia by expanding access to low-income and tribal residents, supporting trade, workforce development, enhancing ratepayer protections, and creating a foundation for the future of affordable and innovative consumer energy initiatives. And then we have 4 goals under that, which is kind of the first goal is to have a successful planning period. The second goal is to promote greater cost savings, to help folks save money with this program. The third goal is to increase our workforce while also ensuring that we have adequate consumer protections, something that I think a lot of us know has been an issue in the solar field so far. And then the fourth goal is to ensure that we're doing effective and correct types of community outreach to reach the folks that we want to reach. So I just wanted to show this up here, and we can think through your reactions to this in a minute or two. Also wanted to share our stakeholder engagement. So didn't think about it. Well, let's go back to this. Does anyone have any initial reactions to anything up here? Positive, things that you appreciate them thinking about, things that maybe we should be thinking about as far as like what's guiding us in this program?
One, it's probably a naive question, but just to clarify with the previous Leo on the where things are at, or we don't know exactly where they're at, but is it that do we feel, or is there a sort of confidence that the dollars have been obligated and it's a question of what the contract terms will be associated with how they get deployed, or is both the dollars in question as well as the kind of contractual requirements of how it's used?
Yeah, interesting question. I think previously there was more certainty around the dollars because it's a contractual obligation. Maybe the landscape has changed around that a little bit. There's more uncertainty than there was before. I'll give an example of Justice 40 is actually not in our terms and conditions. And so we are currently thinking through what changes could be implemented while continuing to have this program and have the award. So having the funding and just having changes. I'm not sure. It could be a change to some of the more like technical assistance type funding, like for workforce development. That's usually part of community benefits plans. Same with marketing and outreach, especially dedicated marketing and outreach to disadvantaged communities that we would, be investing in, knowing that we need to in order to reach those communities. So that I could see potentially that type of change in terms of allowable uses of our funding.
And maybe I could add something that we talked about again. This is we don't know, but is maybe there's still potential for us to do things voluntarily. But again, this is
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of uncertainty around what will not be required versus what will be restricted.
Yeah, so I'm always going to be the person who's trying to push vague languaging, and maybe this is not an answer that you all can really give yet. But looking in Goal 4, it was saying to maximize project benefits for all Virginians. Last, we kind of reviewed some of the Solar for All programs. The program's really was intended to really focus on low-income communities, low-income households. Are we still imagining that being their primary objective, whether Justice 40 and stuff like that exists or not? I think one thing everybody in this room can agree with is that low-income communities are the ones that are going to have the hardest time and have had the hardest time adopting solar energy for all the reasons that we want to see it adopted.
We talked through this the other day internally and are hoping that our thoughts are what happens, but again, we don't know, and that is that we said there's a lot of other federal programs that are low income and hope that, maybe this becomes a program that we can't focus on disadvantaged communities specifically, but we can still continue to focus on that low income portion. And as of right now, that's less than 80% AMI. So I know in Southwest Virginia, that's maybe another barrier. I think we talked through that before, but
I have a kind of a question on this line of thought. What would be, at risk of asking maybe that's like an obvious question, what would be the implications of removing the eligibility restriction for this $156 million and having it be a solar program that serves all Virginians?
That's always going to go first.
As a local pastor and an elder in my community who's taking his church solar, I see that once again it's those communities who get left behind. And I think it would be a travesty to have funds that could potentially impact disadvantaged communities, low and moderate income folks, then be opened up, because those will be the ones who fall through the cracks, and it would only widen the energy inequity amongst residents across Virginia. And it just be another thing that those who represent low and moderate income communities can go back. I mean, if we're trying to build trust with people, and if we've built and we've spent time saying, hey, you know, we want to help LMI communities and we're going to help you, and now we say, you know what, we're going to open it up to everybody and you may not get anything. Imagine the betrayal that will be felt amongst those residents. And not only the betrayal for government, but also what it'll do to those particular communities' opinions about renewable energy, particularly solar energy. So I just think it would be a travesty if that were to happen.
I mean, everything Raymond said. I think one of the things we see a lot of times is not necessarily, even now, it's not necessarily that solar is just infeasible for low-income communities. It's harder for them. It takes a lot for their time to really start feeling comfortable with this. And the broader worry is that if we open this up, a lot of more affluent households are going to be able to take advantage of it much faster. And at the same time, to no fault of industry, that's how they make their money, there can also very easily be more focused on well-off communities because they know that that's where they're going to get installations the fastest, that's where they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck. And so if we're removing that low-income requirement, we're really not only limiting the effect that this can have on households, but the effect that broader industry expansion can have on those communities as well, by not incentivizing those businesses to now go to the majority of low-income communities.
I'm sure industry would love to see it opened up. Nothing against industry, but from a consumer advocacy standpoint, it leaves the most vulnerable people behind.
And I think the other interesting part about that is, of course, like there's the money that's going to the actual program execution, but like the marketing and the education and the outreach piece of it, like if there's a difference between splitting everything evenly and like, I think there could, just to play devil's advocate, I think there could be a scenario where the actual program fundings are split more like in a first come, first served, but much more of the money on marketing, outreach, and education is spent in the low income areas. So it's like where we need to provide more support for those areas is for them to be able to take advantage of the programs to get them to the point where many of the market rate households already are market rate areas. So I'm not saying that that's the right answer. We should be able to dedicate more resources to low income communities. But I think that providing more of those resources and incentives for installers and workforce development in areas of the state where Southwest Virginia in particular, there aren't enough solar installers there. And so I think that's something where that needs to be incentivized in some way. And none of that really has to do with the actual, like, where the money, like, splitting the money for the program evenly amongst all income levels.
That's what we're saying.
I guess my feeling would be, I mean, I like the way you frame the goals. I definitely think low income, certainly all Virginians that are low income, that are people experiencing poverty, people, you know, I think that should be a part of it. I would even say, you know, we have such bipartisan support on state policies. It's really targeting under 80% AMI too. Like if you look at our state housing policies, 80%'s there, and then some properties that can go up a little more, but we're focused, the state serving those 30% or less AMI on many of our housing developments. And we've got the weatherization program, and you know, who's serving at 60% or less of state median income. So I would encourage, even whenever we get this off the ground, is that if we make sure we're going on top of existing programs, so that we're helping make sure the investments the state's already trying to focus on make for more sustainability for residents and nonprofits that are developing these properties, and single-family homeowners who could benefit from the weatherization and this on top. So I think there'd be a lot of focus on Virginia, aligning with Virginia's bipartisan goals on targeting assistance across the state for low-income
to piggyback off of that, yes, and a bunch of people, it's, being able to take a look at the income levels in Wise County versus, where I'm from, Arlington, a little different than AMI and SMI. So being able to bring that in to an expansion of adding in SMI, because getting into the weeds, I apologize, I do that a lot, and I argue semantics a lot, forgive me for both. It also makes, when we start to implement, income qualification is going to be a lot more streamlined. You qualify for WAC, green light. And argue semantics, maximize project benefits for all Virginians. Every household you get off the grid or ease the grid maximizes project benefits for all Virginians, because you've now eased traffic. You've now lessened the stresses on the transmission and distribution lines. That makes the lines last longer. That decreases your maintenance costs for the utilities and the co-ops. Last I checked, that's going to benefit all Virginians.
Yeah, and I would sorry.
Okay.
Just, I guess kind of along those lines, I think that, it's possible that this group is going to have to adapt to changing guidelines as it relates to the low-income prioritization piece. And if we get to that point, we can sort of think creatively about how to navigate that. Some of the programs, like the multifamily piece, is sort of by definition going to skew slightly towards lower income, although not obviously exclusively. But at the end of the day, it's not like all would be lost in my observation, because it's not like we're in a position where non-low-income people are putting solar in their houses at any sort of accelerated rate. We're looking at something like 1 to 3% of all households have solar now. And from the perspective of the environmental benefits to all Virginians, the climate doesn't know if, like, a solar panel is going on a low-income house or not. It's reducing greenhouse gas emissions either way. So I think if it does come to that point, we should still be enthusiastic about the opportunities we have here from an environmental standpoint, and try to do what we can to navigate the rules that are given to us in order to achieve as much as possible some of that original more equity-focused intent.
Well, I would just add to some of the earlier points. Because of the increasing, it's not a secret, demand is going up in Virginia. That cost is going to be borne by all ratepayers. And I think as bills go up in our various electric utility territories, that burden is going to be borne more and more by local folks to pay for all of that energy infrastructure. So I think that gap is going to grow even more. And I think it's important that we try to alleviate that. Generally, not kind of looking at cost shift arguments that often are used in net metering cases. There are circumstances where, the argument is the utility will say that low-income folks are actually bearing the cost of the cost shift because rich people can solar on their homes. So I also think it's just a way to counteract that perception that I think persists for good reason.
Piggybacking off of weatherization, since we do what weatherization where we work, we then kind of qualified those people for solar. So we have obviously solar people that we couldn't even get to because of how many people we had on the weatherization side, and so we still have
a lot of the comments that are being made, and I think at least for me, from a shared solar perspective, I've kind of come into the group already thinking like APCO is kind of where we want to put these dollars, because there is no LMI requirement, there's no LMI exemption associated with the minimum bill, which is a real blockage for and potentially on the economic side for projects. My point being that I feel like there potentially are ways to kind of, if our government says don't have the word diversity, or don't have community, or don't have this or that, there might be ways to have other terms or kind of requirements in there that, such as sort of regional something, I want to say regional diversity, but it's probably going to be a different word. Different ways to kind of reach different parts of the population, different parts of the state, and still be deploying, clean energy and benefits ideally to the folks that need it. But this is hard. We're all speculating quite a bit right now on what the next executive order is going to say or whatever it's going to say. So, but I do think it's worth. I think to Dave's point, I don't think we would want to refuse the dollars if they're supposed to go towards clean energy. But ideally, we can still kind of be creative in making sure it achieves the benefits and the goals that we all thought it was supposed to in the first place.
Yeah, and I have been hearing that. I don't think everything has to fundamentally change. I think phrasing will become more important moving forward. I think accessibility can be a word, something that we can really focus on. Yeah, so yeah, I don't think we have to change, forcibly. But a procedural question here. Was between the agreement for Virginia and UK, were there any targets or commitments for low-income communities, or is that something for the eventual advisory board to really determine?
So our work plan, which I know there's like a few copies going around the room, and it's also on the website, is the Justice Parties all through there, and in accordance with what we were expected to have before. So we don't know if we'll need to change that yet.
And the whole, per the EPA Solar for All program from the beginning, the funding is accessible to low-income households or those located, or a select group of folks located in disadvantaged communities, so kind of that geographic or income base. So, the speculation is very helpful to us. Like, it is helpful to have other perspectives on like scenario analysis and pros and cons of those different scenarios. So yeah, there could certainly be a future where it's the income qualification is what remains. And appreciate the point about accessibility and also the point about energy burden as well. I think kind of taking the lens of energy burden rather than maybe another way to look at target geographies could certainly be a possibility in the future.
And we can continue to have this conversation, but I did just want to show you, we have been working with Deloitte on some general, helping us with federal compliance and building out some initial guidelines based on our work plan. And they have helped us to create a community assessment, which I can talk more about if anyone has questions, and also a plan for stakeholder engagement. At this point, it is just a plan. Again, we'll figure out what happens next, but kind of the main inputs that we're looking for at this point, or like questions that we feel like are still not answered, are on financial assistance, solar developer eligibility, recipient eligibility criteria, our application process, and then kind of best practices for marketing and outreach. And so we have some more detailed information on anticipated stakeholders, but just wanted to get kind of some feedback from you all on, is there any big kind of questions that we're missing, or groups that we're missing from anticipated stakeholders for these engagements that will again hopefully happen at some point in the near future.
This probably falls under solar developer eligibility, but I would say one of the things I've heard is consumer protection of the needs. It's like vetting the developers, making sure that the customers have a way to make sure their system's doing, make sure that a background investigation's been done on any strange people coming into their home, sort of thing.
Jess has been very vocal about making sure that's like top priority for us, so we've been talking a lot about that.
Kind of following the same recipient criteria, maybe even going over through the application process. One really interesting thing, or one really useful thing to consider is Appalachian Power has an energy efficiency program right now where they both manage and accept new companies into that fold. They can share that out with the customers of their utility, but also that it's those businesses that are actually the applicants for the program once it gets installed on that home. And so that really reduces the need for the household to be able to go through these more complicated, a lot of times, state or federal application processes, and really allows the solar developer to be the specialist in that area so that they can take a household and let them know that, hey, we're going to be applying for these funds for you. We're not going to take the next step until we get those funds approved, while also not requiring people who may not even have access to internet to be able to apply to the same programs.
How did they outreach? Is that through APCO to those?
So they have a secondary, or maybe an in-between organization that manages that program for Appalachian Power, and they do a lot of the outreach directly to energy efficiency businesses, and I believe APCO does the outreach through their own means, for the big deals or what have you.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but they also work on the income qualified side through the local weatherization providers across their service territory. So those organizations do a lot of the marketing as well.
Probably to low income.
To the low
yeah.
income, on the low income side.
I have a completely unrelated question. Would you like me to just hold on to it for a while? I just don't know if we're
Maybe if there's more like thoughts on this list, then we can come to you next time.
So what I would add to desired inputs is mandatory compatibility with comparable state programs. So, and the two in my mind are Virginia Housing's low-income housing tax credit program, who's doing the most rehab and new construction for the multifamily sector. So to make sure that that process and this process combined, and you know, making sure solar, and I know some other states have done that with state programs for solar for all, where those programs are linked and it's easy for folks to do both, and so that long term the residents are getting that benefit. And the same with the weatherization program. And you've got a bunch of LIHTC developers here and weatherization folks, but if we've got the roof funding through the weatherization deferral program, Department of Housing and Community Development. If we could have some, making sure those programs work together, it would really give a full package while you're dealing with the client. And I think someone said eligibility. So like if you qualify for this, then you qualify for this, and you don't have to do 3 sets of paperwork.
And that may also help, that type of cross-program compatibility. I think it eases the burden on this particular program for calculating eligibility. If we can go to some outside source, you're already getting this, you've already qualified for this or that or the other, so you're greenlit for this. Whether or not we're able to use the money exclusively for that specific target. The other possibility on eligibility criteria, and I'm not sure how this might work, but you may want to look at some energy data also, like not just dollars coming into the household or qualification from another program. And the weatherization programs are what I'm thinking about. Like the folks who need the weatherization programs have, they're going to have high energy bills. And it's not a perfect compatibility, but if you've got somebody with an older home who might need some weatherization repairs, that might also be a correlative indicator. Maybe not a perfect one. And I think we should also make sure, especially for those cases where you've got an older home that needed or received weatherization support, let's not discount ground-mounted solar even for single family, because sometimes the roof is the part of the house that needs the help, and sometimes it can get it through additional solar funds. But whether it can or it can't, if there's if there's physical real estate there, let's not discount the ground mount idea also for those folks.
I think the ground mounted idea is very good because I did not go rooftop solar on my church. Didn't have, I was below the 10 years of a roof with a 125-year-old building. But the availability of land kept that project going because we were able to do a ground mount system. So that's a very effective point. I did want to ask a question in relation to the multifamily. If I'm not mistaken, the program design call was multifamily with single meter, right?
So, do you want to?
That's been discussed.
That's
So,
Jesse's favorite topic.
yeah, it's very fun. Master metering is tricky because you can't really give direct benefits through a bill because no one's actually getting a bill, it's included in rent. So states that are focusing on master metered buildings, they're trying to transfer benefits in some kind of other way, as in like financial literacy classes, free Wi-Fi, stuff like that. I personally would prefer to actually transfer direct financial benefits to all the residents, so it's definitely still under investigation, but for now I think I'd prefer to do multifamily.
There is some experience with community solar with that too, with having requirements for master meter accounts that they have to distribute like some X percentage of the credit benefit to the residents all in the building. So there's good examples in New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. We're doing it in Maryland too, actually.
Okay, yeah, that's good info. And the multifamily section of Virginia code is really similar to Share Solar, the way it's working now. So that's fine.
What's the mechanism for dispersing that benefit?
Well, those aren't region. I cover Maryland. We're still working on actually the regulation aspect of it. So I'd have to talk to colleagues about the Northeast specifically about how it's being implemented. But I think that the gist of it, New York, I think, and I think Massachusetts both have, I think, a similar requirement, which is that the building owner and the master meter owner, the apartment building owner, can't keep more than, say, 50% of the benefits of the credit value. They have to distribute the remainder to the residents, and that can come through a lower rent cost or some economic benefit that way. Sometimes I think there could also be, I've seen sort of arrangements where there's some other community benefit, the gym or something like some other economic kind of communal space benefit. But I think ideally it's something that would lower the cost of staying in that apartment for all the residents.
And HUD has a list actually of types of benefits that aren't directly bill lowers, and it's pretty creative, but there's good stuff in there.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to this topic of kind of the relationship between the solar that we're going to build through this program and energy efficiency, because just generally speaking, I think we all know that in theory, most of us, including myself in my home, don't really do this right, but you're supposed to kind of maximize your energy efficiency capability before you go think about solar on the roof, right? And as it pertains to this program, particularly with that 20% requirement, if we're requiring every project has 20% bill savings, and we're putting solar on inefficient energy hog houses that, with this missed opportunity to make them efficient in the first place, now we're like overbuilding the solar arrays on those houses to get to a 20% of excessively large consumption in the first place. And kind of spinning off of that, if we do end up in a position where we're required to incorporate some non-low income recipients into some of these programs, and we're applying that 20% bill savings there, then now we're kind of, again, we're going to be building funding larger projects on larger houses to get to 20% of a larger demand because it's a non-income household. So there's just a couple things that kind of flag down the road.
I'll just add that I think that's an important thing to make sure we're including both whenever we're bidding residential solar companies and whenever we're doing this outreach and education piece. My limited experience with residential installers is that they're not always the most excited to see this because they don't offer that in-house, and then they realize that that's going to delay their project by a year. As far as like how they calculate project size, everybody wants to see linear versus worth of energy bills at their current usage rate. And so making sure that we're vetting solar companies that understand that concept, that are interested in helping, or maybe even kind of have those wraparound services as well, it is really crucial to making sure that that actually takes place for these households that otherwise may be thinking truly about how they use and where they get their energy for the first time.
Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna say that's a good point because the Dominion program is actually part of a state pilot program, and the state law required that to qualify for the solar, you had to have gotten energy efficiency upgrades through the utility program or state program or some funded program. It was not tied to a minimum bill savings, and that brings up an excellent point because of like the length of time we had for the pilot program, we would not have been able to do any solar because we would not have had that 12 months of data. So being able to estimate it, so then it's like, okay, well, did they achieve 20% because of the solar or because of better adequacy?
And I will just mention we're talking internally about stacking with our other potential federal funding, so it's great to hear that that's solution to prioritize.
So just to, yeah, we absolutely would love to help consumers on their journey, not only learning about, but also actually implementing energy efficiency upgrades, weatherization, roof repair and replacement, and then solar. But we'd love to hear just a little bit more about those who have kind of done those together, the mechanics of that, kind of this idea of like, should you wait a year between those projects? And if not, how do you manage that? Like especially with the bill savings requirement. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, and well, something I'll mention is just thinking about this, we have, it's pretty clear that we cannot count any energy efficiency savings as a part of our solar savings, so that's something to consider as well.
I would not recommend waiting a year. I don't really think that's logical, especially if the program only has a certain timeline, especially towards the end of the program. You don't have that time. At the beginning of the program, you do, and not at the end. At least in its program, they sort of had a 1-to-1 ratio on how they did it. So if most people did a 4.8 kilowatt system, so they wanted like 4,800 to go in. Ideally, they would want more. They want like 5,000 or 6,000 to like show up on there, but they would approve anything that was around like 4,000 to 5,000, and that was like they considered to be the cheapest rating. So they did smaller systems, but that was like the approval rate that would automatically go through. So they were like yes. So I don't know exactly what that means, like percentage-wise on savings, but most people always had a savings system, and some would store in their system to then help up like using the summertime or time.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So you can take, say, okay, past the 12 months of consumption, my first year production is going to be 4,800 kilowatt, let's say 1,000 4,800 kilowatt hours. Well, this person used 6,000 kilowatt hours last year. We're projecting 80% savings. Does that count toward the metrics? Can you use that estimate to say, okay, we are projecting they're going to save 80%?
I think, if I'm understanding your question, there would need to be a new baseline set. We couldn't account for the energy efficiency savings. There would, I guess, need to be a new baseline, and I'm curious how that would be set after a recent energy efficiency upgrade in order to establish a baseline and model what would it take that 20% savings moving forward.
And then that gets into my next question would be, can you go off of energy model, or do you have to have 12 months in here?
We don't know.
Yeah.
EPA is supposed to come out with more savings guidance, but that's probably falling to the bottom of their list.
I'm going to tell a very bad thing because we have been getting, I'm sure you guys, we've been getting phone calls from some of the folks who got solar and are saying, this thing doesn't work. My bills are higher than they've ever been. The reason their bills have been higher than they ever been is because the high was 10 degrees.
Right, yeah.
What? So there goes your baseline.
Yeah.
So depending on the month of installation, a year later.
Yeah.
But a weatherized house is going to be able to provide you back to the whole point of if you should wait or not. But a weatherized house is automatically going to be able to provide you with a higher savings energy-wise. The house is not using as much energy, and they're getting solar, therefore going to bump down any cost associated to that client for their energy bills. Therefore, it's a win-win overall.
And that makes sense because your baseline before weatherization, your baseline after weatherization, so the savings would be greater. But the question is, what numbers is Virginia Energy allowed to use when they're doing this validation to EPA?
And so when also during weatherization, when they do the whole audit and everything, they want a 20% savings of energy within that weatherization audit, and that when they do that weatherization, so then that's just goes up.
Well, I think this is helpful, like line of questioning, and something that we have considered, as a kind of question to NREL. We have some technical assistance funds from NREL that are on pause, but this would be something that we've considered, getting their input on. Is like how to do these calculations. What data can we ask for from residents or installers that wouldn't then cause like additional burden and slow down processes? So it's helpful to hear.
Sorry, one other thing, and I'm not sure if someone already mentioned it, but I think it was, but a house that's not weatherized, if you're putting solar on that house, they're still going to be using just as much energy, and it's not going to see the grid any more than before. They're just going to be alleviating some of it from that solar. But that house is still using more of the energy, and it's not going to see the client per se any savings.
So maybe that's a alternative to qualification. Kind of restricts, but at the same time, so did you have weatherization through one of these programs? That's a green light. Oh, you didn't? Well, now we've got to go through this much longer process.
Or stakeholders that we're missing?
I just had kind of a stakeholder engagement point. Tribal nations I saw were mentioned. I think not just tribal nations, but other groups have a certain level of distrust when it comes to these types of initiatives. We've seen this with like heat pump implementation in low-income communities. So I think it's worth thinking about extra lead time to build that trust, explain the program, and to take the time to understand, because there's a lot of money that's come into some of those communities. There's new construction that's going to be coming up, lodge houses and things like that. So it could be a good opportunity to start engaging.
Just one idea with the local government outreach is that, with that rising housing costs, a lot of local governments have those programs on. There's some tax abatement ability to prevent gentrification, and so there might be thinking like the community development offices, planning offices. Obviously, they have an environmental energy efficiency team, but there would be a huge amount of data from them on people that are struggling to afford their energy costs if they would partner with you.
I do want to flag one other thing. There's been a lot of talk about stacking different state programs and different federal funding. If that be the route, then what this program calls for marketing and outreach is not going to be enough. Because now you're not only trying to educate homeowners on solar, but on all the other programs that you're stacking on top of this. So I think if we consider stacking that, then we need to also consider what the budget for marketing and outreach should be, because now you're having to educate people on more than just solar. So let's take that into account as well, because I think that speaks to Ashisha's point about distrust. You're gonna have to spend the time building that trust, because now I'm not just asking you to get in one program, I'm actually getting 4.
Yeah, I can share something that we have been working on, understanding that everything is somewhat uncertain, but another federally funded initiative that Virginia Energy has been working on is the establishment of a one-stop shop for energy programs information, recognizing that in the future, it'd be great if we have some sort of universal application for, hopefully our future home energy rebate programs, the WAP program, something like LIHEAP and solar programs. But at the very least that we think we can do now is step into more of a role around bringing that information together and curating it for people to understand. So we're working on a website for that and some branding to launch that new initiative. I would say in the coming months, in the next half year, hopefully. And along with that, something we're envisioning and we'll be looking for more input on is the establishment of an Energy Ambassadors program, a compensated program where we have community organizations that we compensate to help us with that outreach, to bring people to the website and understand like what front door to enter. Hopefully through energy efficiency or whatever works. So I would love to speak with you more about that idea and get your thoughts. We actually have, just a few months ago, we hired our agency's first energy outreach coordinator, and she's leading on that effort. So I'd love to connect you guys as well.
And I think in an ideal world, when it wouldn't necessarily be asking the participant to apply for every program, it would be that they apply for one program and then they are shepherded through all of you. You get a home energy audit, great, you are now going to get home energy upgrades through the IRA program, great, you qualify for that. Now you move on, now you qualify for solar for all, and you're going to get a roof repair and a solar system installed. So I feel like there can be like, especially with all of the infrastructure that's being built to support people through those parts of the process, moving them to the next stage shouldn't feel like too much of a burden on the participant.
One thing I'll say though is that you won't have to necessarily pay for the marketing and outreach for those programs because they already exist. So it'll just be like sending them to the proper place. So like if you send them to a weatherization program, you'll need to run your pumps. We have a lot of marketing. Dominion has it for batteries and CCHP. They have it. There might be a Dominion program weatherization. So it's not necessarily you guys paying for that marketing. It's only going to be solar for all. So it's not like an additional cost to you guys, and they get to know about all these programs that could possibly help them.
Yeah, we look to maybe streamline that.
Before we leave this slide, just a few thoughts on solar developer eligibility. I don't know how that's going to work, how that's going to be vetted. Just some thoughts, random thoughts occurring in my mind. SIA has a national code of conduct that you don't have to be a SIA member to subscribe to it, but one could subscribe to the SIA National Code of Conduct. Basic preventions against fraud and misrepresentation. Might be nice to have something even more than that, some type of actual relief for the affected customer in the case of certainly a fraud or misrep, but more than that, some sort of failure to perform or a financial problem or breakdown within the developer. Don't want that to happen to anybody, of course, but I think some amount of financial assurance on the part of the developer should be proved up as part of the process to bring a developer into this. I'm not trying to say what that should be or what form it should take, but we've explored these concepts before, certainly in Virginia policymaking. There might be some basic inquiries on Virginia Energy's part. What type of business are you? Who are your principals? That kind of stuff.
And I'll just mention, Jesse worked in Illinois before in solar, and they have some pretty strict consumer protections there. So there's a lot of ideas around, small ways we could try to implement similar ideas.
I think any amount of checking that the agency's going to do, because the agency's not going to be there between the homeowner and the developer. It needs to send the developer in already having been.
Yeah,
chat. And my other thought from earlier actually has to do with the prior slide, but I see we are well past 2 o'clock, and I can hold this until our next official, unofficial meeting.
Coffee and donut get together.
Yeah.
Just one more thing to add on that too, just for developers, they just need to know what they're signing up for, like BABA, Davis-Bacon, those are meaningful things, and there's some waivers floating around, so who knows where it'll land, but yeah, this is not your everyday project.
All right. My other thought was about BABA. So my friend across the table said it, so now we can go back. One of our sub goals under our mission statement is to encourage and enhance ethical practices, not only among the skilled workforce, which is important, not only among the developer community, which is important. What do we know about the BABA requirements that come along with this money? Are they realistic from a developer perspective? That's a question. And does the BABA requirement at all assure us about the integrity and ethical practices in the panel manufacturing process that are ultimately going to be, we're going to use some federal money to buy those panels or some of those panels and put them on. Just like I'm interested in a safe, skilled workforce here in the Commonwealth, I'd also like to know that, kids aren't sewing the panels together with their feet somewhere else across the ocean.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think we don't have all the answers on BABA yet, but we do know that BABA will not apply to all of our sub-programs, so that's a question.
What's BABA?
Oh, sorry. Buy America, Build America, or Build America, Buy America.
That was well timed. Well, and it strikes me just from a political perspective in terms of the national conversation. BABA may appeal to the administration.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that we've had conversations internally in different ways. Some being like, obviously it's going to create a higher burden for contractors, but on the other hand, I think that burden is probably good in some ways to like ensure we're getting, quality things. So I think that's an ongoing conversation, and maybe we can come back to it in our next official, unofficial.
And again, product quality is important too. We don't want to put something on somebody's roof that we may have even paid to improve their roof, and then we're going to put something on it that's supposed to last, what, minimum 20 years before its major declination in performance would even start. We want that to be a quality product, and we want to make sure that everybody in that chain of production is done right by.
Well, thanks for all these thoughts. I appreciate it. I think I just have a few more slides, and then we can have some more discussion or wrap up. So again, I think I've shown this to many of you before, and it's in the work plan. We are currently in our Solar for All planning period. Again, timeline is all a little bit unknown, but if things do continue to move forward as we hope, we would begin implementation at the end of this year, early next year. So we're hoping to kind of answer all of those questions and do the stakeholder engagement on the last slide over the next coming months, and then by the end of this year be prepared to begin implementation. And this grant would go on for 4 years past that. And then this is just what we're looking at during our planning period. Again, this is kind of all up subject to change, but we're really focusing right now on developing some initial programmatic guidelines, and so hopefully soon we'll begin stakeholder engagement to help finalize those guidelines. And then in a future meeting, we hope to get some feedback on those guidelines as we've established them.
A future official.
We'll see. I don't want to say. Either way. And then once we have guidelines, we'll be releasing RFPs for program administrators, meant to be by early spring, but that again may be pushed back. And then once we have those implementers on, then we'll move into some other tasks such as finalizing our marketing, education, and outreach, figuring out how we're going to have a contractor network, and those sorts of things. Okay, and I think this was kind of the last, slide. Let me go back.
Good way to catch us. You might need some.